Good morning, Tuesday. Andy Brownell and Tom Ostrom on Rochester today. Good morning, Tom.
Good morning, Andy.
So, the Vikes and the Packers win again.
Mm-hmm.
You got a little bit of a quarterback controversy brewing over there in Lambeau. This guy they brought in to cover for Love is doing really well.
He sure is. I got a chance to watch both games because they were on different channels, so I went back and forth. And the Vikings had a great game.
Yeah, they did.
Certainly, they're undefeated, and the Packers too. And you're right. Willis is the substitute Green Bay Packer for the injured Love. And my God, he ran for a touchdown. He had 200 yards passing. He had 70 yards rushing himself. He was really outstanding. And the irony is Tennessee traded him to Green Bay.
Right. And,
but the Vikings are strong too.
Yeah, you'll be conflicted next weekend, right? Oh, no, that's...
No. Yeah, it's next weekend.
It is next weekend.
Vikings and Packers play.
That's the one time that you cheer only for the Packers. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
What do you think of your Vikings? You must be pretty proud.
So I'm enjoying it. Let's put it that way. Yeah, I am almost shocked at how well they are playing. I'm very impressed with Darnold. I hope he's okay. He had an injury as well in that game yesterday or Sunday. I'm sorry. So keep our fingers crossed because he has certainly added some unexpected life to this club.
Yeah. Well,
I didn't have. Let's put it this way: those Vegas odds I mentioned last week that I put down that $10 bet, and it was, I think 80 to 1. Now it's 25 to 1.
Wow.
The Vikes have a chance. I'm getting way ahead of myself, but I'm enjoying it. Enjoy it while it lasts, as they say.
You bet.
All right, what is in the mailbag today?
Political satirist, cartoonist Margolis. The Republicans had Dick Cheney in the Bush cabinet, and Democrats hated him. They called him a warmonger. So Margolis recalls that. And now it shows the Democrat donkey kissing Cheney because he endorsed Harris, and the donkey is holding a sign, Dick Cheney is a war criminal, then that's crossed out. Dick Cheney is for Kamala.
Strange world we're living in.
It is. And then Harris has said this in just about every time she's had to answer an interview or whatever the question, she starts off with, I was born into a middle-class family. That's what she says all the time. Whatever the question, she says that. So the Babylon Bee says, wife says to husband when he asks, why is the car on fire? I was born into a middle-class family.
Oh, gosh.
And then we'll talk about this later, but the Israelis, who haven't admitted it yet, had a massive sabotage campaign on communication devices among Hamas members, and they blew up and injured hundreds of them and killed a couple. And Branko's on top of that, and he shows two Hamas members talking through tin cans with a string between it, says this will have to do for now.
There's some truth to that.
Yeah.
Is that it for the mailbag?
No. We'll talk about that Israeli thing.
Oh, yeah.
They don't admit
absolutely.
It
we have
later,
to have some time to talk about. That's turned into quite the powder keg over there.
Yep. Is that a pun? That's a pun, Andy. From Rose, I've been listening to Rochester today. The shows have been great. I heard President Trump talk to a Jewish group the other night. He was on fire. I was raised in a middle-class family, Kamala, and all our neighbors mowed their lawns was her answer to one question. But I'm concerned about President Trump's life. I can't believe it when liberals are still saying how dangerous he is after these two attempts. And then there's an Iranian hitman the Secret Service got a tip on. The guy was arrested. I'm suspecting the powers that be on the left are encouraging this. By the way, Tom, you talked about Hy-Vee's award as the best national the best grocery chain in the nation. You said there were three Hy-Vees in Rochester, but there are actually, she said, four of them. And then,
Oh, you're
uh,
right. 37th Street. I always forget about that.
yeah, yeah. And then from Wayne, he read that 36 Secret Service agents are assigned to the United Nations in New York City. Why? I did some research on that, and a lot of ambassadors from nations that are in civil wars or that they are threatened by are under Secret Service uh, protection. Their families are, and they are when they drive in Secret Service cars. And but anyway, it's interesting that that's the case, and that's the mailbag.
Well, we have on a regular basis Secret Service agents in Rochester. If you have anybody of a foreign from a foreign government, a dignitary, and that's not that rare to see them being patients at Mayo Clinic, they'll have
Yeah.
Secret Service protection while they're here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's it for the mailbag. We'll take our
Yeah.
break. Back in a flash. Tom Ostrom, I'm Andy Brownell, and it is Rochester Today. News Talk 1340, KROC AM 96.9 FM. Welcome back. Andy Brownell with Tom Ostrom. It's Tuesday on Rochester Today. And we'll start out with Minnesota news. Tom, what do you want to lead off with?
You and I have often spoken about the resilience and flexibility police officers have. They never know what kind of call they're going to get. And you had two articles on the KROC News website about the incidents, the exchange of gunfire involving state troopers shut down a Minnesota freeway due to the use of force incident, and a culprit evidently trying to shoot another driver, and state troopers had to intervene in that. And then you had an article about 5 people being shot and 2 killed in the latest Minneapolis shooting. Tim Walz's Minneapolis is becoming quite dangerous. St. Paul too.
Yeah, the shooting in Minneapolis was doubly shocking because it occurred at the very same corner where the previous week SUV plowed into a group of people and a 16-year-old girl was killed in what police say was a homicide and have charged a woman with murder in that case. Uh, and it coincides with continued national media coverage as well as politicians on one side of the political aisle saying that crime across the United States is down. And I suppose technically you could argue that, although there are some flaws to the FBI's reports, there are many communities, some of them larger communities, that don't submit their reports in time to be included in this report. So, but that happens all the time, so I suppose that would mitigate the results. But it ignores the fact that if you go back to pre-pandemic 2019, I'm sorry, crime continues to remain very elevated across the United States, especially in our largest cities.
Mm-hmm.
And that includes murder rates, assaults, carjackings, robberies, you name it, the worst of the worst offenses. And yeah, from a year to year, you could say that from 2022 to 2023, there was a decrease, but it was a relatively modest decrease from what was already an extraordinarily elevated level from 2020, 21, 21, and 2022.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not as if things have gotten a whole lot better. Let's put it that way.
No.
I think people see that. And I think they're a bit incredulous when they see those reports without a more, thorough explanation.
Yes. I'm including our immediate neighbor, Wisconsin, in this one. A Wisconsin 12-year-old boy saved his dad's life during a bear attack. The little boy was named Owen, and his dad, they were hunting outside their cabin looking for a bear that was allegedly injured. And if they didn't run into it in the woods and the bear leaped on his father, the Wisconsin dad, Ryan Bierman, 43, and his 12-year-old son Owen. This from the Minneapolis Star Tribune. And
Wow.
the bear was fighting for its life. I was fighting for mine. He said, my 12-year-old son took his rifle, his hunting rifle, and shot the bear. When it was on top of me, I could feel the bullet going through the bear, and the bear died on top of me. And the father was badly injured with gashes, cuts, and punctures, and had to have medical treatment. But he said, I'm proud of my son. He held it together, but he was pretty shaken afterwards. The Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources confirmed the story. And understandably, the dad says, we are not going bear hunting anymore.
Yeah. Wow, that's amazing. There was another story of heroics here in Minnesota that just recently got national recognition. A Carnegie Medal of Heroism was granted to a young man from Waterville over south central Minnesota. Let me see if I can get his name right. Dalton Gross. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Spelled Grose. He was out on a boat in Fountain Lake over in Albert Lea, apparently for his job, something to do with a construction project. And an 85-year-old man driving a truck crashed into the lake, and the truck sank. And this young man immediately brought the boat over to where he saw this happen, jumped in the water with his clothes fully on, so a lot of weight from the wet. And this was in September of last year. Fought the water pressure and was able to get the door open to the truck after
Wow.
a great struggle because of the water
Sure.
pressure. Was able to pull the man out of the truck, and then because they're both fully closed, they sank to the bottom of the lake. And this man was able to cradle, I guess was the term they used, this 85-year-old man, and then did leaps from the floor of the lake. So they would get up to get air and then sink back down,
Wow.
and then slowly make his way up the sloping lake bed towards shore by doing these leaps to get air. And he had to do several of these before it got
Wow.
to enough shallow water that he was able to carry the man over to a dock, and then somebody else was able to help him get him up. So yeah, you hear stories, good stories like that. They deserve recognition.
Gosh, you bet. You bet. New York Post, September 11, date of the article. Restaurant owner Brian Ingram and former Attorney General candidate Jim Schultz, Minnesotans, testified before a congressional committee last week. They were in the spotlight at a congressional hearing, and Schultz, the former Republican nominee for Minnesota Attorney General, among the witnesses, and he and his partner testified on the record of Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, and they said to the congressional committee, Minnesota's in a crisis during the Walz tenure. The state has become a place where criminals run free, law enforcement is assailed, families are without the security they deserve. The two men talked about Walz standing by, and the increase, as you just said, Andy. They said violent crime, homicides have surged by 70%, 75%. Gunshot victims have doubled. And the Minnesota chef and restaurant owner Ingram spoke about the impact of crime on his business. He said, I moved here in 2012 to Minnesota from New York, and we've had 12 burglaries that we've suffered here. And then one of the men's son died of a fentanyl overdose. And House Majority Whip Tom Emmer, Republican of Minnesota, said these men gave voice to what every Minnesotan realizes in this crime wave.
There's a book out written by Paul Gazelka, former state legislator, highest ranking Republican, I believe. Was it in the Senate or the House? I'm sorry, that slips my mind. Gazelka, definitely a partisan, right? Very much a Republican partisan, but also has a reputation of civility. And he wrote a book. He just blasts Walz in this book. And he says the only reason he wrote the book was because Walz has risen up through the political stratosphere to running for vice president of the United States, and he felt that people should be informed about what occurred in Minnesota during the COVID pandemic and the governor's response to it, but particularly the rioting that followed the death of George Floyd. I have not read it, but I've heard that it does not paint a pretty picture of the governor's tenure here.
Mm-hmm. That's increasingly coming out. A reporter, again, Karski, who usually writes on Florida politics, picked up what we talked about already, Andy, the results of a poll of a Twin Cities radio station and another periodical news outlet at how close the race is in Minnesota. Harris leads Trump by 4 points in this poll. We talked about that poll, and even though the Democrats have a registration advantage, independent votes are rallying to Trump, and this early September poll. And the problem is Walz doesn't have resounding approval in the state. 50% of Minnesota voters like him. That saves him from being underwater. But Trump musters just 21% support in the Twin Cities, but 73% of those in Minneapolis and St. Paul are backing the vice president. But outside major cities, it's Trump's turf. And it said in greater Minnesota, which is everywhere outside the Twin Cities practically, Trump has 61% vote, 28 points ahead of Harris. And that is a tight race in Minnesota.
It is a lot tighter than I think anybody really anticipated after the governor stepped in to become part of the presidential ticket. And those numbers are being mirrored in other parts of the country. The New York Times out with a new poll on Monday showing that Trump has taken leads in Arizona, Georgia, and North Carolina, if I remember correctly. Quite sizable lead in comparison to what has been taking place in Arizona, the races in Georgia and North Carolina, all of these battleground states. A bit more modest, but in each one of these cases, the polling has found something similar, and that is these independent voters are sliding over to Trump's side as the election date comes closer. And that, as we've talked about before, is crucial because the base supporters for both of these candidates, Harris and Trump, they're set in stone already. And they're fairly equal, although it varies according to geography, obviously. So the election is going to be decided by these independents, which side they switch to. And right now, it seems like the momentum is back in Trump's favor. Whether that'll stay that way over the next 4 weeks or so, we'll have to wait and see. But it's actually more like 6 weeks. But it's interesting considering the amount of positive press Harris has received and the amount of negative press that former President Trump has received.
Mm-hmm.
We have to take a break for news already, Tom.
Mm-hmm.
We'll do that, come back with some national news, international news a little bit later on, talk about what's happening in the Middle East, particularly with Tom Ostrom. I'm Andy Brownell, and this is Rochester Today on News Talk 1340, KROC AM at 96.9 FM. Good morning. Welcome back. Rochester Today on Tuesday morning with Tom Ostrom. I'm Andy Brownell, and of course, national news at this time of our program. Tom, what do you want to start with?
In 1945, Cardinal Francis Spellman founded and hosted the first dinner in 1945 honoring Al Smith. Al Smith was a popular Roman Catholic New York governor, and he lost the 1928 presidential election to Republican Herbert Hoover. Ever since then, Spellman's dinner has been held. It's a charity fundraiser event. The next one will be this October on the 17th in the Catholic Archdiocese. It's quite an affair. And for years, it has featured the presidential candidates at the same table. It's been gracious, and this uh, and Kamala Harris won't go to it. I mean, Trump went and Hillary went, and they're supposed to roast each other, and other people are too. Cardinal Dolan, Archbishop Dolan in New York City, is the host usually. He's got a great sense of humor, but it's really an event, and it's a charity event, and it's popular on television, and it's good natured. But Kamala won't go. She just can't expose herself to the public. She certainly can't expose herself to humor. And then she can bet that Trump would give a few cutting remarks to her. So would others. But she's impossible. I don't think she's capable of fighting back or answering questions as he shows. And she's just not going to go to it. And that's quite a fracture in that tradition.
Did Hillary Clinton and Trump both show up
Yep, and they
in
laughed at
2016?
each other and they shook hands and they roasted each other. They were good natured, as
How,
people usually are at these events.
how about Biden and Trump in 2020? Same thing.
I think you're right. Biden didn't go either. Yeah.
I'm not. Yeah, I have no. Part of me wonders if this is tied to the abortion debate, seeing as this is a function of the Roman Catholic Church.
I'll bet you're right. If she and Kamala doesn't like Catholics much, so yeah, that's probably a big part. But I think it's also her own weaknesses that she's well aware of.
Okay. What else do we have as far as presidential politicking is going on?
Well, Donald Trump has just gotten the support of the Michigan Muslim Democrat mayor. That's amazing. Amir Ghalib is the Muslim Democrat mayor of Hamtramck, Michigan, and he has endorsed President Trump against Vice President Harris. He said, "We were better off when Trump was president economically, and there were no wars when Trump was in office." And he said, and I had a good conversation with him, and he will do his best to settle Middle East issues and prevent those wars. And we are supporting him. And that's really something because there are thousands of Muslims in Michigan, and including in the mayor's district, and there are over 100,000 Arabs in Michigan, and thousands of them in the mayor's district. So that's a surprise.
I agree. It is quite a surprise, and it's a last. Well, I wouldn't call it last minute, but last. It's getting pretty close as far as this election is concerned. We're really heading into the meat of the election cycle.
And then a retired Border Patrol chief appeared before Congress and a Republican committee and said Kamala and the Biden regime ordered him to cover up the increase in the number of suspected terrorists that have been arrested at the southern border. He said that they ordered him to cover up the increase and not mention the suspected terrorists that were arrested at the border. And he said, in San Diego, we had an exponential increase in special interest aliens. Those are called SIAs, aliens with ties to terrorism. And I was ordered to not mention this in public, not bring it up. And he said it was a significant threat, and we're all worried about it. And I was supposed to be quiet about my public remarks. And I was told not to release any information on the increase in these SIAs or mention any of the arrests. The administration was trying to tell us there was no threat at the border. And then this man, his last name is Heitke, said that there were 150,000 flights to fly illegals to Texas and no resources, not enough resources to track fentanyl. This former agent was called Aaron Heitke.
And obviously, the immigration issue is immigration, crime, and the economy. I think will be. Well, I got to throw the abortion piece in there as well because I think candidates running as Democrats will try to push that to be a major issue. But it seems to be from watching the polling and trying to pay attention to the many events being held in battleground states, that it's really the immigration and the economy issues that are being pushed to the forefront by the by voters at this point in the election cycle.
Yeah.
I think the polling shows that as well.
Mm-hmm. A man was arrested for threatening to assassinate Supreme Court justices. The Department of Justice announced the arrest of an Alaska man Wednesday. He threatened Supreme Court justices and their families with fatal violence, and the DOJ didn't mention those that were threatened. But this man has made public statements, and he's charged now with 9 counts of making threats, and he faces a prison term. But this business of and there was a threat, of course, to a Supreme Court justice, about a year ago, arrested outside the home of Justice Kavanaugh. But if assassinations become common in parlance, I think President Trump should say, if people start thinking it's okay to use that as a political device, Kamala should start to worry, and so should Biden, because here you got people threatening me, Supreme Court justices, and they could threaten others. It's a very dangerous time.
It's a very dangerous time. And the man that was arrested for the latest assassination attempt on Donald Trump, I know the Department of Justice has released a letter that they have found as part of the investigation, where after the fact he laments the fact that he was not able to kill the former president, but then he also offers up a bounty on Trump, and that obviously is garnering a lot of criticism from those who are supporters of Trump, arguing that publishing that letter with this man's announcement of a bounty, whether or not he could back that up or not, actually heightens the danger of the candidates.
You bet. Tim Walz made another blunder, and Republicans have made a campaign out of it. He was giving a speech somewhere, and he said this: "It just doesn't have to be this way, the way it is now. We can't afford 4 more years of this."
He said that?
Yep, that's what he said. And so Republicans are not only laughing, but they have a political ad on that.
I bet they did. Oh my gosh. No, I was not aware of that one. That's pretty wild. Okay, we'll take a break. When we come back, we'll talk foreign affairs. Of course, foreign affairs right now, it's probably not getting enough attention. It's obviously being covered by all the major networks and the newspapers, but the implications for the United States probably are not receiving a fair share of the coverage. Let's put it that way. Okay, we'll be back in a moment. More Rochester Today. Tom Ostrom. I'm Andy Brownell, and this is Newstalk 1340, KROC AM and 96.9 FM. It's Rochester Today, Tuesday. I'm Andy Brownell with Tom Ostrom, and we have some time to talk about foreign affairs today, particularly the Middle East, where, oh my gosh, the latest developments are something like out of a Mission Impossible movie. This is astounding that somehow allegedly the Israelis, Mossad, most likely, infiltrated the supply chain for Hezbollah where it gets its equipment. And so when they decided their cell phone communications were no longer secure, and that the Israelis and other intelligence agencies were able to track them, they decided to go to more primitive methods back to the early 1990s and use pagers. Mm-hmm. And whether an explosive device was put into these pagers or some other method was used to create these explosions, wow, what a development that is. And the investigation into where these pagers and walkie-talkies came from remains open, and the source remains mysterious.
That's right. And they planted a device evidently that lets the batteries heat up in them that causes the explosions. Monica Showalter of the American Thinker had an article on it. They said the Israelis know where their enemies are, and they've been getting them one way or another. And the Israelis booby-trapped walkie-talkies, solar panels, smartphones, intercoms, a slew of electronic devices, and it avoids injuring the civilian population, but it goes after Hezbollah people, and it's hurt thousands of them, and killed a few of them, and
Dozens, probably would be safe to say.
and it's amazing. And
But I
Hezbollah
will say,
says,
Tom, some civilians have been harmed by these explosions as well
I
because they've
haven't,
gone off in crowded places.
but they've been running away from it, but it largely avoids them. And the Lebanon Red Cross said ambulance teams were responding to different areas of Lebanon. Um, and it's just fires have broken out in random buildings. The United Nations Security Council has an emergency meeting now to study these attacks and condemn them. I don't think they've yet condemned the Hamas attacks on Israel that started this war, but and sending rockets into Israel. Uh, but the Israelis are so advanced in agriculture and technology that instead of fighting them, the Arab extremists should learn from them and do the same things in their areas.
And going back, you pointed out that Hezbollah started this latest conflict, and it started on October 8th, a day after the notorious Hamas attacks against the Israelis in Israel or in Gaza, and obviously triggering the Gazan war. But almost immediately, Hezbollah came out and celebrated the Hamas attacks and began lobbing shells and rockets into Israel, and that's only escalated, especially in recent weeks. And the latest thinking, of course, was this coordinated pager attack was meant to, warn Hezbollah that, hey, uh, stop this, or you're going to face. I guess the Israelis basically said that too. Either stop this, or you're going to face out an all-out war.
Yeah.
And the developments this week, the Israelis hit airstrikes Monday, and the death toll is quite high. The Israelis pointed out that they warned the people living near these sites to get away from them because they were identified as areas where Hezbollah was storing rockets and other munitions.
And
so the escalations continue on both sides, and it does at this point appear that an all-out war between Hezbollah and Israel is more than just a little bit of a possibility. It might be a likelihood.
It's occurring in Gaza, and it's going to occur. It's occurring in Lebanon, but Netanyahu says we're going to destroy them, and the White House National Security spokesman John Kirby said a regional military escalation is not in Israel's best interest. How in the world can they say that? Netanyahu is going to destroy them. We never say that about Ukraine. An escalation of that war is not in their best interest. It could start World War III. But we're telling Israel to put on the brakes. It's just outrageous, and I don't blame Netanyahu for being furious with the United States. Why don't we say that to Ukraine? Why don't we say that to Putin?
Tom, you make a valid point. Both conflicts extraordinarily dangerous to the United States and the West. Both have the potential to blow up into much larger conflicts. Obviously, a head-on-head clash with the Russians raises the specter of World War III, as you pointed out, because of their possession of nuclear weapons. The thing with the Israeli conflict also raises that possibility because it seems as if the Iranians could flip the switch any day. And to be honest with you, they probably have a couple warheads stored away that they haven't pulled out to test yet because they have likely produced enough fissionable material to produce some sort of weapon. And this war with Hezbollah and Hamas, both of these conflicts, are proxy wars with the Iranians. And obviously, at least so far, Harris and the Biden administration have said they back Israel. And of course, they're our most faithful ally in that part of the world. So They will rely on us to provide munitions, intelligence, and possibly military might in the form of aircraft carrier strike groups if this thing widens any further.
That's right. And retired CIA analyst Fred Fleets, who was in the Trump administration in national security matters, he said this: we should be celebrating uh, what Israel is doing. It's a victory in the war against terror, and White House should not be trying to intrude on Israel. They should be celebrating Israel's competencies and successes and strikes on Hezbollah.
Well, in fact, one of the Hezbollah leaders taken out by a strike in Beirut was a man who was on the United States most wanted list of terrorists.
Yeah, that he killed
Because,
American soldiers. Yeah.
Yep, the embassy attack in Beirut and other actions that took American lives and American service members' lives,
Yep.
many of them, in fact. And that was interesting that there wasn't some sort of congratulatory message in
Yeah.
that case, because the United States has been after this guy. In fact, I think they had a $2 million bounty or even higher on this person for many, many years because of things he had been involved in that were direct attacks on the United States. I read a opinion piece, a Wall Street Journal opinion piece over the weekend, that it was a scathing review of the Biden administration's foreign policy. I don't think I've ever seen it laid out so starkly, that the consequences of the missteps of the Biden administration from almost day one have led to the point where we're at right now with these potentially regional or even world conflicts in Europe and in the Middle East that did not have to happen.
And that was what source?
That was Wall Street Journal.
Okay.
And the kernel of all of this was the botched withdrawal from Afghanistan and the message it sent to our adversaries around the world, including the Iranians and the Russians, emboldening Putin to actually go through an invasion of Ukraine. And then, of course, the failed attempts by the Biden administration to re-engage the Iranians to go back to the deal under the Obama administration that was canceled by Trump because he thought it was a worthless agreement in the first place. And the ability of the Iranians to play havoc across the world stage. And it was pointed out that, ironically, Vice President Harris is on the campaign trail bragging up foreign policy achievements when this opinion piece, I'll point out, outlined that a great case that they probably shouldn't be talking about foreign policy if they want to talk about successes. Okay. You know what? We're out of time. We're going to have a show Thursday. Thought I'd let everybody know about that, but we will be back next Tuesday. I have another break. I get to do that once in a while, Tom.
No, you deserve it, Andrew, the hours you put in, but fun show.
All right, and we will chat with you next Tuesday at our regular time on Rochester Today. He's Tom Ostrom. I'm Andy Brownell, and this is News Talk 1340 KROC AM and 96.9 FM.